Today we're going to be learning about dividing decimals with whole numbers. But before we go on any further, we're going to review some important terms. The first important term is divisor. Remember that the divisor is the number that you are dividing by. That's how many pieces or how many parts you have to split up your dividend into. Your dividend is the number that you are splitting into smaller parts. And your quotient is the answer to your division problem. So in this video, you'll learn to solve division problems by dividing decimal dividends with whole number divisors. You'll also solve real-world problems involving the division of decimals with whole number divisors, and you will find quotients with decimals instead of remainders. So that's probably the most important difference between decimal division and whole number division, is that we will not use remainders. So we're going to keep working to find out what that's going to look like. The first problem we're going to look at is the one about Olivia and her donuts. Olivia bought 6 donuts in a package at the store. The total cost of the donuts was $2.49. How much money did each of the donuts cost? We're going to go ahead and break it down into the information about what we want to know and what we know already about the problem. What we do know is that Olivia bought 6 donuts, and the total cost, and the total word is very important, of the donuts was $2.49. What we need to know is how much did each of the donuts cost. So the question is asking how much each one cost, and we're starting with the total. Since that's the case, since we are starting with the total, and make sure you write this statement down because it's very important. You actually need to have this slide written down too, because it's very important when you're shown a word problem that you write down what you know and what you need to know. This is one of those statements that we would do in class where we would put a star next to it. Since we are starting with the total cost of $2.49 and splitting it equally to find the cost of each donut, we will need to divide. Since we know that we're going to divide, we're going to set up our division problem with $2.49 as our divisor, because that's the total cost, divided by the 6 donuts that we have to split that cost between. When you divide with decimals, one of the most important things to do when you only have a decimal in the dividend is to bring that decimal point straight up. So that's what we're going to do before we do anything else. Now we can go ahead and start dividing. 6 goes into 2 0 times, so we're just going to go ahead and put that 0 there. Now we're going to take 6 into 24. 6 goes into 24 4 times. 6 times 4 is 24. And notice, we only worked with that decimal to bring it up. From now on in the problem, we are going to ignore anything to do with that decimal point. That means whenever we subtract, you don't bring it down or anything like that. You only put it up in the quotient right at the beginning. So we do 24 minus 24 and we get 0. Then we continue on with our steps of division and bring down the 9. 6 can go into 9 one time. 6 times 1 is 6. Do your subtraction and you get 3. Now here is where decimal division is different from whole number division. You cannot have remainders in decimal division. You'll never have a remainder because a remainder is just a part of a number, and a decimal is a part of a number. We can't have 2 different types of the portions of numbers, so we're going to stick with decimals only. So instead of letting this be the answer, this isn't right. We will not have any remainders because we're working with decimals. What we do instead is add zeros, because we can keep adding zeros to the end of our dividend and they won't change the value because it's after the decimal point. So we're going to go ahead and bring down this 0. 6 will go into 30 5 times, and 6 times 5 is 30. And now we are done with our problem. But they asked for a money amount. So this would be saying that each donut costs this much money, 415 thousandths of a dollar. This is not a reasonable money amount. So what we have to do is round. And we're going to just write round. And the hundredths place is right here. So we look at the 5 to tell the 1 what to do, and that's 5 or more, so we raise it up 1 more. That 1 becomes a 2. The 4 stays the same. And we have 42 cents. If we were to write that in a complete sentence, we would write each donut cost 42 cents. After we've completed our problem, let's make some important notes. Make sure you write these down on your paper because they're very important to remember about decimal division. The first thing we need to remember is to bring up the decimal point to your quotient before you begin. This helps to avoid any decimal mistakes by the end of your problem. The second thing is to work out your division problem as usual. Remember, we didn't use the decimal point when we were subtracting or anything else throughout our problem. The third thing is very important. You can never have a remainder. Remember, decimal numbers are also portions of numbers, and we can only have one type of portion of number in our quotient. Instead of having remainders, add a 0 to the end of your dividend and bring it down to continue dividing. And remember, that's okay because a 0 after a decimal point does not change its value, but it allows us more numbers to work with. And the last thing, you may need to round to a given number to make your answer reasonable. That's why when we got 0.415 for our answer, we rounded the 1 to a 2 and made 42 cents since they asked for a money amount. Let's work one more problem out together. We're going to find the quotient of 4 and 28 hundredths and 5. And we would put our 4 and 28 hundredths as our dividend. We would put our 4 and 28 hundredths as our dividend since that's the first number listed, and the 5 would be our divisor. The first thing we do is to bring our decimal point straight up to the top. 5 can't go into 4 at all, so we're going to put a 0 there to hold its place. 5 can go into 42 though. So 5 can go into 42 8 times. 5 times 8 is 40. Do our subtraction. 42 minus 40 is 2, and we bring down the 8. 5 can go into 28 5 times, and 5 times 5 is 25. Do our subtraction, and we get 3 as our answer. Now remember, that's the last number that we had to bring down, so typically this would be our remainder. But since we're working with decimals, we can't have a remainder, so what we do is we go up to the dividend and we add a 0. So we're going to extend our line and add a 0 so that we have another number to bring down for the 3 to be with. Now we see how many times 5 can go into 30, and the answer is 6. So our quotient for this problem is 856 thousandths. Typically in a problem, I will say to take your answer to the thousandths place and then round it to the hundredths place. So in this case, we ended at the thousandths place, so we're done. But we're going to round it to the hundredths place. So we look at the 6 to tell the 5 what to do. Since it's 5 or more, we raise the 5 up to a 6. And we have 86 hundredths as our rounded answer. Now use the back of this paper or a separate sheet of paper to complete the next 3 problems on your own. Problem number 1 is 26 and 6/10 divided by 7. Problem number 2 is 24 and 4/10 divided by 8. And problem number 3 is 127 and 5/10 divided by 12.